Hello and welcome to our Friday morning live stream here at Empty Cloud Monastery. Whether you're watching this Friday morning together with us here live, or if you're watching this later on, I hope you're having a good day and good practice. So today we're going to be doing another sutta study, this time a sutta from the Sutta Nipata, which is a very beloved collection of suttas, often mostly poetry and poems. So I will go ahead and render homage to the Buddha, and then we can go ahead and get started with our sutta discussion for this morning. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Saranang Gacchāmi. And hello to all the friends who are joining in. So far, Maria, Greg, and Mano. Hope you're doing well. So today, our sutta for the morning is called Kiṁsīlasutta, which it could translate as what morality. So sila, many people will know in terms of the pancha sila, right? The pancha silani, or the 5 precepts. And you might also know this word from one of the fetters to one of the chains which ties us to the round of rebirth, called Silabbata Paramasa. Silabbata Paramasa. And that is wrongly grasping, or a kind of wrong comprehension of sila and vata. Right? So sila means morality, or you could say maybe a religious habit, right? So it's a religious precept or religious observance. It can also be used more generally for kinds of observances or habits or precepts that people follow. But often we're using it in the context of developing a spiritual practice, right? So things like the 5 sila, right? The 5 sila are to refrain from killing, to refrain from stealing, and so on. So those are all particular practices or habits that you take on, and the particular things that you do. Like maybe, for example, bowing would be a type of sila. And then vata is a vow, which is related. And it's a vow like, for example, you vow only to eat 1 meal a day, or you vow not to eat in the evening, or you vow to not sleep lying down, or you vow to do any kind of thing like that. So this sutta is called Kiṁsīlasutta. So it's asking, what morality, and we'll see what that means in more detail. But what kind of sila, what kind of habit, or what kind of precept or observance, right? Spiritual observance. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll begin reading the sutta. And this is from Bhante Sujato's translation, if you'd like to follow along. It says, with what morality, what conduct, fostering what deeds would a person lay the foundations right and reach the highest goal? And then the response to this says, honoring elders without jealousy, they'd know the time to visit their teachers. Treasuring the chance for a Dhamma talk, they'd listen carefully to the well-spoken words. At the right time, they'd humbly enter the teacher's presence, leaving obstinacy behind. They'd call to mind and put into practice the meaning, the teaching, self-control in the spiritual life. Delighting in the teaching, enjoying the teaching, standing on the teaching, investigating the teaching, they'd never say anything that degraded the teaching, but would be guided by genuine words well spoken. Giving up mirth, prayer, weeping, ill will, deception, fraud, greed, conceit, aggression, crudeness, stains, and indulgence, they'd wander free of vanity, steadfast. Understanding is the essence of well-spoken words. Stillness is the essence of learning and understanding. Wisdom and learning do not flourish in a hasty and negligent person. Those happy with the teaching proclaimed by the Noble One are supreme in speech, mind, and deed. Settled in peace, gentleness, and stillness, they've realized the essence of learning and wisdom. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So that is the Kiṁsīlasutta, and now at this time we can go ahead and discuss a little bit the meaning of this. So as you can see, it begins asking Kiṁsīlo. So Kiṁsīlo, Kiṁsamacharo, Kanikamani, Brohayam. That means, as Bhante Sutta translates, with what deeds, right? With what sila, like with what precepts, observances, or with what conduct, right? He says what morality, with what conduct, and fostering what deeds, doing what actions would a person lay the foundations right? Naro sama nivithasa uttamathanchapapune. So this is saying, essentially, how would, and reach the highest goal, I should say. So how would they lay the foundations right to reach the highest goal? So this is asking the Pali, naro sama nivithasa. So how would a person be kind of well established, right? As Bhante Sujato calls, lay the foundations right. So nivita is related to the word nivesana, and this means like a place where you settle down. So sometimes this is used in a negative sense, like idameva satya binivesa. So that means insisting on only this is true, everything else is false. So that's like when you insist on a view, like you take an opinion and you kind of settle down on the opinion, right? Like living in a house, you move in and you start attaching to your views. But this is used in a different sense. This is saying, how do you settle down? How do you get stable in the right way? Samma nivitasa, right? So in the right way of settling down so that you attain the goal. So this is really talking about the very basis of the practice. Like when you move into a house, right? You haven't yet, this is not talking about the advanced stages of meditation. This is just saying, what are the basic, modes of conduct, the basic behaviors that a person should establish themselves in and use those as a foundation so that then they can attain the goal. So this is like, what is the basis of our practice, right? Where do we start? What is the basis for practicing? And so then the Buddha begins and he gives what is really, you can understand as the basis, right? What is the basic practice? And he says, honoring elders without jealousy, they'd know the time to visit their teachers. So honoring elders without jealousy and visiting teachers, right? That is how you get to hear the teaching. Otherwise, you can't practice it. So that is, and then the rest of the sutta, as we heard, a lot of this is about relating to the teaching. It's about relating to the teacher. Because if we don't hear the Dhamma and if we don't relate to the Dhamma properly, then we will not be able to practice in accordance with that, right? So most of the people who are probably listening to this, you probably have a foundation in, listening to the Dhamma with enthusiasm and with interest, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be clicking on this video. But maybe someone else in the future will see this video recommended by YouTube and you'll be listening to it with a skeptical mind and not sure about this this teaching. So you can understand how if you have a skeptical mind and a disrespectful mind or a jealous mind and so on, then you won't be able to hear what's really being said, right? So Ajahn Chah, who was a Thai monk, and I believe other monks from that tradition also sometimes will talk about how when you listen to a Dhamma talk, you should not listen with your ears, but you should listen with your heart. Right? Because when we're just listening with our ears, then we are not really hearing the essence of what's being said. We're just hearing the words. But we want to go to the heart. And so when we listen to the Dhamma, this is why this is saying, for example, the very first thing he says is Buddha Pachayi. So honoring the elders. And you might know this this from a very common verse, which if you go to a monastery, you will hear it chanted almost every single day. And that is Abhivadana Silisa Nichang Buddha Pachayino Chataro Dhamma Vadhanti Ayuvanno Sukham Balang. So Abhivadana Silisa Nichang Buddha Pachayino. So Buddha Pachayino. This is saying here Buddha Pachayi. So Buddha Pachayi means honoring elders, someone who honors elders, who respects people who are elderly, specifically, seniors, like venerable people. So this is really referring to mostly monastics, Obviously, it also refers to your elders in lay life. Like you should honor your elders who are, your parents and your people in your community who are seniors, and your teachers who are elders. So it also includes that. But in the context of the Dhamma, it's mostly talking about people who are ahead of us in the practice, right? And especially monastics, because traditionally that's who would be, doing most of the teaching and reciting, and they would have memorized the Dhamma and be teaching it to lay people. And also in monastic life, it's very, very important, the honoring of elder monastics. So in lay life, this is also relevant. If possible, it's really good to honor people who are older than you, just in general, but especially people who are ahead of you. Like if you're learning a craft or a skill, it's very good to honor those people, right? Or if you're learning meditation, it's good to have respect. Why? Because if you don't have respect for the teacher, for the person who's ahead of you, then you will not be listening with your heart, right? Like if you are skeptical, or as it says here, honoring elders without jealousy. So what this means is that sometimes when you go to a teacher, you might be jealous of maybe their accomplishments, or maybe something like if they have many students, maybe you're jealous that they have fame or a good reputation, or they have a lot of influence. So when we are jealous of people who are ahead of us, then actually we can't learn from them, right? Because we just start focusing on our own desires and our own preferences. So, this can manifest as like when someone else is teaching, specifically related to Buddhism, when someone else is teaching the Dhamma, we should not be jealous of the fact that they are teaching, or the fact that people are listening to them, or the fact that they have, if it's a good teacher, maybe they have some kind of good qualities like good morality, or maybe they have good meditation or some other good qualities. So you don't want to be focusing on any kind of jealousy, but rather, apart from the person, apart from the circumstances, you want to just focus on that respect, right, for the person. Just focusing on that respect, because that is a condition for a heart which is happy and a heart which is receptive to learning. So actually, respect is a really important quality, and that's what we'll see with this teaching. It's really important in the Dhamma. In Buddhism, in monastic life, I should say, we practice bowing to senior monastics, even someone who's senior just by a day. We bow to them, and we bow because of this. Because the Buddha said, "Abhivadana silisa nichang buddhapachayino chataro dhamma vadhanti ayavana sukham balam." So for one who is constantly honoring the elders, the people who have the senior people who practice sila, who are moral, one who constantly does that, they grow in 4 qualities. They grow in life, beauty, happiness, and strength. So what the Buddha is saying in that verse, and then talking about later on here, is that when we honor people who are senior to us, really we are the ones who are gaining, right? So when we bow to people, we're not bowing for them, right? Like to make them happy. But rather we're bowing to foster respect in our own heart. It's like when we bow to a Buddha statue. The statue doesn't actually get anything out of it, right? The statue is just a piece of, stone or metal, or sometimes, some other material. So we don't bow to a statue in order to make the statue feel respected, right? But we bow to the statue in order to cultivate respect in our own heart. And why? Because we don't want to be jealous of the Buddha or jealous of his qualities, but because we want to look up to those qualities so that then we will aspire to develop them. So respect is something that I can kind of try my best to talk about it, like try to describe to you the benefits of it, which I'm trying to do. But really, you just have to try to do it. You have to just practice it. So I really recommend bowing to the Buddha statue. Here we're doing a meditation retreat at the monastery, and several times during the day we have many bows that we're doing, full kind of prostrations going down to the ground. And it's a really good practice, because you practice just kind of humbling yourself, lowering yourself physically to help open your heart, so that then you feel that sense of receptivity to the Dhamma. Like when you bow, what you're saying with your heart, ideally, is you want to empty yourself of all your conceits and your pride or arrogance, the sense of feeling that we know what to do, and we empty ourselves, and then we want to feel like we want to receive the teaching, and we want to learn and grow, and we want to be humble and receive the wisdom of the Buddha, not the wisdom that we might have gained, even just a tiny bit, right? So it said, even the arahants bowed to the Buddha, and they bowed to the senior monastics. And actually, if an arahant, say you had an arahant, like in the Vinaya, there's a story of a 7-year-old arahant. He was 7 years old and he already attained awakening, but he still would have bowed to a monastic who was senior to him, who was not even a stream enterer, maybe even a monastic who didn't have the best conduct. He would have bowed. Why? Because he's respecting the Sangha. He's respecting the third, the triple gem of the Buddhist community of practitioners established by the Buddha, who dedicate their lives to practice in accordance with the Buddha's teachings, and then who, within that community, there's a field there for people who have the potential to attain awakening. So even a senior monastic, even someone who is, we don't, even an arahant bowing to someone else, so let alone us who are not arahants, right? They would still bow out of respect. And so it's the same. We bow without jealousy. We bow not thinking like, oh, I wish people bowed to me, or bowing thinking, oh, I wish that I had, I was like this teacher, but we bow just with that wanting to learn in our heart. And that will be for our long-term, our benefit. Okay, so I spent some time on that so that you can hear the benefits of the first line, which I think it kind of summarizes the essence of this teaching, right? It's saying really that sense of respect for the Dhamma and for the teachers. That's really the essence of this whole sutta. And so that first line there is kind of the essence. And then it says, they know the time to visit their teachers. So knowing the right time, right? So sometimes it's not the right time. Sometimes people want to talk to the teacher or a teacher, and it's not the right time. So we need to know the right time. And so this means this is also related to cultivating a sense of respect. So when we have respect for the Dhamma and for the teachers, then we know like now is the time to do my own practice, and now is the time to visit, to ask questions or whatever. So because the Buddha said that someone who honors him, someone who reveres him and worships him, is someone who practices his teaching. Before the Buddha passed away, it said that he was laying down between two salt trees, and as he was dying, the devas, the gods, started sending flowers from heaven, like divine flowers sprinkling down, and people were there to worship his body and to venerate him before the Buddha passed away. And that is when the Buddha said, he said, one who really is worshiping me is someone who's practicing my teachings, not worshiping his body, right? So the Buddha, he really valued practicing the teaching. That is how we worship him. So it's the same with other teachers. So if you have a teacher and then you don't actually practice what they say, but you just go to see them, then you're not honoring them. You're not practicing well, right? Because they're wasting their time, in a way. Like they're wasting a time teaching people who they don't practice what they say. So then they just have to keep teaching the basics, and actually they're not accomplishing. Why do we teach? We don't teach so that people can be entertained with Dhamma talks, right? But we teach so that people will practice. So when we have a sense of humility and respect, that will help us practice, because then we'll feel like, wow, I really need to, in order to be able to go with the teacher, I need to be, practicing so that it's, it's worth their time, because we don't want to waste their time. So we have that respect, like we remove the kind of self-centeredness in our hearts to the best of our ability, to a limited degree, so that then we can go and see the teacher with that sense of like, okay, now I need more guidance. Now I need more instruction. And so it's the same with online Dhamma talks, or with Dhamma talks in the monastery, which are scheduled, is that we want to be practicing them to the best of our ability. So knowing the right time. And so the idea here is that when it's the time to listen, we listen wholeheartedly, like with our whole mind. The Buddha says we should listen to the Dhamma ekagacita, with a mind which is 100% immersed in that theme. So the mind should be 100% one pointed, one focused, like 100% wrapped around the theme of the Dhamma talk. And then when the Dhamma talk is not going on, then we should be practicing wholeheartedly on the Dhamma. So that's knowing the right time. In the suttas, you'll see instances where someone wants to go see the Buddha and then they realize, oh, now is not the right time. The Buddha's on retreat. He's spending time alone. So then they don't go to his kuti and knock on his door, right? Like I've heard stories of some temples where the lay people will just go to the monk's room and knock on the door and be like, Bhante, I want to do a ceremony because I'm not feeling well, or, that would not be, ideally, please don't do that because you want to be respecting the teacher. So you want to respect the people who we're learning from. And then also you actually see also in the suttas that sometimes a Buddhist monk will be going to an ashram, like a monastery of other religious people. And as the Buddhist, even sometimes lay people also, as the Buddhist person, lay person or monk is approaching, the other religious people, they're like having a loud conversation, laughing it up and talking about all kinds of things. And they say, there's a Buddhist coming. Wait, be quiet, because the Buddhists, they really love quiet. And if we're quiet, then they might come and want to talk with us. So the point is that if we're very noisy and loud, in the time of the Buddha, they wouldn't have liked that. So knowing the right time, like knowing when is it time to see a teacher, right? It's time when, it's a calm time, when we're not disturbing them with lots of noise and so on. And so when we have that sense of like watching, okay, is this a good time? Is this, am I being self-centered here and wanting to get attention, or am I really approaching with respect and reverence in order to learn? And when we have that in our heart, then we'll learn more. Because if we just go looking for attention or looking for care when it's not the right time, then we actually won't be learning. We're just trying to express our own opinions, right? So that's why that goes together here. Then he says, treasuring the chance for a Dhamma talk, they'd listen carefully to the well-spoken words, right? So we've talked about this. So when we have the opportunity to listen to the Dhamma, we should really cherish that. Like, wow, it's so precious. In the Mahayana tradition, I believe it's from the Chinese, and also in Japanese, they sometimes recite it. Before they say listen to the Dhamma or read a sutra, they have a verse, which I don't know fully, but it begins like, the true Dharma is rarely encountered in tens of thousands of eons, something like that. So the idea is that, and then they say, now we have the chance to see it and hear it and feel it. May we, may we vow to understand the Tathagata's true meaning. So that's the basic idea. So the idea is like the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha are very rarely encountered, right? In this samsara. It could be eons, it could be universes of time before you encounter the Dharma. And now you're hearing it, you're seeing it, you're encountering it. So, it's really important to listen attentively, to understand. At the right time, they'd humbly enter the teacher's presence, leaving obstinacy behind. Okay, so we've talked about this, right? At the right time, entering the presence. And then it says, leaving obstinacy behind, right? So this is, again, what is obstinacy? It's stubbornness. It is clinging to our own opinions and ideas, clinging to our own preferences. So sometimes the teacher will say things that we do not like, that we don't want to hear, or that we don't agree with. And that's good, because if we only ever heard things we agree with, we would just remain deluded, unawakened beings, right? Because the Dhamma, it's not our opinions, right? The Dhamma, the Buddha, if he didn't teach the Dhamma, no one would have realized it. That's the precious quality of a Buddha, is that we need the Buddha to arise in the world to teach people. It says, Tathagato uppajjati loke arahang samma sambuddho. So the Tathagata arises in the world, and he's a fully awakened Buddha, and then he teaches the Dhamma, so dhammang deseti. He teaches the Dhamma for out of compassion so that people can understand it. So it's very rare to hear the Dhamma, and even more so, it's very rare when we hear the Dharma to actually not be fault-finding with it, not be judging it, and not being picky about what we approve and disapprove of, right? It's very common. So actually, the very first teaching of the Buddha is often said to be the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, right, where the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. But actually, that's not the first teaching of the Buddha. One of the first teachings of the Buddha was he was sitting under a tree, and a person came up to him named Upaka. And Upaka said, "Oh, your faculties are very clear. Like you seem very serene. What's going on here?" And the Buddha tells him, he says that he has attained the deathless and that he is the supreme person in the world, that he's become the victor. And this person, Upaka, he says, "Yeah, maybe." And then he walks away. And it says that he took the wrong path. So he's like, "Yeah, okay, sure. I don't know about that. Right? Maybe so. May it be so." So the idea is that he's like, "Yeah, I don't know." And also, then when the Buddha went to his former disciples, when he went to teach them, right, he walked a long way. The Buddha walked very far in order to teach these people who had rejected him. Why? Out of compassion, right? So he went all the way, and it said that as he was coming, they said, "Oh, there comes Gautama. Let's ignore him. Don't go and help him. Like, don't go over there and don't be respectful. Don't get his bowl and receive it. Don't help him and get his things. Don't set up a seat for him because he left. He's a weak person. He couldn't handle the spiritual austerities." So what is this sutta talking about? This sutta is talking about the exact opposite of that, right? Like when the teacher is coming, we should receive their things. We should set up a seat. We should help them. We should be respectful. We should cherish the opportunity to be in the presence and hear the Dhamma. So it's the exact opposite of what the Buddha's first disciples were doing. And then it said that eventually, as he got closer, they were so overwhelmed by the peace and the kind of spiritual power that he was emitting, just like something was really different, that they couldn't help themselves and they went and they helped him. So we want to have that attitude. And so what that means is, you see, they were stubborn in the beginning. They were like, oh, they were clinging to their own ideas and their past. So when we're like that, we won't learn. So it's okay to question the teachings, but when we're hearing the Dhamma, what we want to do is we want to be able to set aside our ideas and say, well, if we don't agree, that's okay, but we need to recognize, I don't agree. I am clinging to my ideas. Maybe your ideas are correct, right? But at least recognize that you're clinging to them. So then like, maybe I'm wrong about this. This is a point where I'm clinging to my ideas. It doesn't mean that you have to agree, blindly to what is being said. Actually, that would not be good. If you just blindly agree, then you'll never understand. So the Dharma is to be understood for yourself. It's to be individually understood. So you can't just believe it blindly. That's not enough. So you have to understand it. So it's okay if you don't understand, that's fine. But you want to recognize, but I am being stubborn. I'm being stubborn about this. So, sometimes we are very stubborn. We don't want to hear the advice. And also, when someone has to give advice, it can also be very difficult. Like giving admonishment is also very difficult. So we want to be respectful of that, because sometimes it's not easy to give admonishment. And so the person is not, oftentimes if a teacher or a spiritual practitioner, like a spiritual friend, is giving us admonishment, it's often coming from a place of like, they really want to help, and they finally mustered up the energy to try to do that, because they want to help out of compassion. And so it's, a good spiritual friend is not coming from a place of wanting to harm, even if they say something that's very hurtful. Like they say something that we find very exposing, like they say like, oh, you have these faults. Like maybe we have a tendency to be very greedy or very angry or very unmindful or very too social. And so then they tell us, and then we might be very hurt. Like, oh, wow, that's really disappointing that I have that, or that they said that. But actually they're trying to help us. And so we want to be really not clingy, not be stubborn. There's actually a whole list of qualities that the Buddha has for whenever you're receiving admonishment, you establish in your mind, I will not do this. Like they're very good. Like he says, when someone criticizes me, I will not divert the subject to something else. I will not criticize them. Like, oh, well, you do this. I will not cling to my views, but instead I will give them up easily. So actually one of the qualities is that we should give up easily our opinions when people are criticizing us. Now, of course, we can evaluate if the criticism or the teaching, if it's a Dhamma teaching, if it's right, if it's true, but we don't want to be stubborn. Or if we do have stubbornness, we want to recognize that. Okay, and then they would call to mind and put into practice the meaning, the teaching, self-control, and the spiritual life. So I think this we've covered, right? So they would call to mind, meaning once you've heard it, you think about it, and then you put it into practice. Delighting in the teaching. And this could also be translated as delighting in the Dhamma. So this is Dhamma Ramo, Dhammarato, Dhammaetito, Dhamma Vinityanyo. So they delight in the Dhamma, enjoy the Dhamma, they stand in the Dhamma, and they evaluate the Dhamma. They would never say anything that degraded the Dhamma, but would be guided by genuine words well spoken. So see, we don't want to criticize and slander the teachings, but we want to have that sense of respect. Like we enjoy it and we want to delight and really establish ourselves in that. So like when we have the opportunity to hear the Dhamma, we want to be elated, like this is really precious and I really want to enjoy, get the most out of this. So, and honestly, most of the time, just because I have been giving a lot of live streams and so on here, most of the time it's just like we're saying the same thing but trying to find new words to say it. So like it's really sometimes it can be difficult to communicate these things in words, right? And especially in words that are different or that are engaging with the audience, that will be meaningful and connected. So most of the time, really, what is the point of a Dhamma talk? There's places where the Buddha talks about this, but really he says there's two things that come to mind. He says that when we listen to the Dhamma, either it's to learn new things, like to clarify what we don't know, or it is to reinforce what we do know. So even if you already know what's being said, the quality that is being talked about here is that you still delight in the Dhamma. So like, for example, if you've been raised in a Buddhist context, or if you've been coming to the monastery for a long time, you've probably heard a million talks, exaggerating on generosity. But when someone hears about generosity, if they are a Dhamma practitioner, they will be elated. It doesn't matter if it's the same words over and over again. They'll be really happy because they're not looking for, entertainment and new words, but because they are delighting in the meaning. They delight in the meaning. So actually the same thing can be really delightful if you delight in the essence of the Dhamma. So we want to have that quality in our heart of like, even if it's the same thing over and over again. There's a point where the Buddha goes to a Brahmin's house for alms food. And he goes and he shows up at the door and the Brahmin gives him alms food. And then he goes again the next day and the Brahmin gives him alms food. And then the next day the Buddha shows up to his house and the Brahmin says, you keep coming back here, keep coming back again and again looking to get food. And the Buddha then, responds and he says, again and again, you sow the seed. So again and again, you're farming. Constantly, you're doing the same thing. Think about it over and over again. A farmer, every single year, they plow the field or they plant the seeds or they let it rest. They're doing the same thing constantly. Again, and we could just extend this. Like again and again, you have breakfast. Again and again, you have lunch. Again and again, you go to work. Again and again, you go to sleep. Again and again, you read books or watch movies or whatever it is. Again and again, you listen to music. Again and again. So we do things all the time, right? But then the Buddha is pointing to this person, like when it comes to giving, being generous, he's complaining 3 times. But we do things again and again all the time. And then the Buddha also says, again and again, they get reborn. Again and again, they take existence in samsara. Again and again, they come back. So we have been here since beginningless time, and we still aren't tired of the same stuff. Like we keep coming back life after life, over and over and over and over and over again. And we're still not tired of it. We still want to keep coming back again. Our mind is still full of desire. But when it comes to practicing the Dhamma, or we hear a Dhamma talk and it's like, I've already heard this, or I already did this. I already practiced generosity. I already practiced the precepts. It's like, no, we should be delighting in that again and again, like over and over again, because we do that stuff all the time with unwholesome things. So it's not a problem. So we would be delighting again and again in the meaning of the Dhamma. Okay, and then it says, giving up mirth, prayer, weeping, ill will, deception, fraud, greed, conceit, aggression, crudeness, stains, and indulgence, did wander free of vanity, steadfast. So this is a list of many, many qualities which should be given up, right? So the first one, giving up mirth, and actually the word is hassa. Hassa means also like laughing or joking. And there's actually a word in Pali, hassapanya, which means laughing wisdom, which is a good quality. So you might be maybe a little bit confused at first, like why is the Buddha saying to give up, laughter when he elsewhere praises what's called hasapanya, like laughing wisdom, or maybe people who seem very happy and they're laughing. I think there's maybe spiritual teachers who are known for laughing. Like for example, there's a very famous monk, Ajahn Brahm, right, famous for telling jokes, right? Or also other even strict monks like Ajahn Chah was very famous for laughing, right? So what is the Buddha talking about here? Is he saying that we should not be laughing? And the way that I would take this is that we should really be careful about joking and laughing in unrestrained and inappropriate times. So if we are happy in wholesome things, like happy in the Dhamma, or just having a lighthearted and we have a little bit of a beat in our heart, that's good, right? But if we are kind of out joking about unrelated things and just laughing it up and being unrestrained and cackling really loudly, like it's we want to be mindful, right? So we remember the story of the people who were speaking very loudly, and when they saw a Buddhist coming, they got quiet. So in Buddhism, we really value silence, and so we want to be very mindful about kind of what Bhante Sujato translates here as mirth, right? So maybe you go to a party and people are woo, and they're cheering and they're drinking and they're laughing and they're having a nice time. From a Buddhist perspective, that's really kind of a waste of time, right? We want to be happy and lighthearted, and it's okay to smile and to laugh, but we want to do it related to the Dhamma, and we want to do it in a restrained way, not in a way that's unrestrained. Because when we're like that, then we're not receptive either. I remember one time in Italy, we were on Tudong and we were walking, and we took a shortcut through the beach because it was like a beach area right by the sea. And so we took a shortcut to get to a different town walking along the beach. And there was one section of the beach which was a private beach. So it was like a party area where people who had like private homes would go to this part of the beach and they would party. And so we were walking through past this part of the beach to get to the other side of the beach. And everyone was, drunk and dancing and listening, blasting music and, partying and whatever. And this one person on the beach, he was drunk, and he came to the monastics and he said like, "Oh, finally you're here to save us." And he was like, he was kind of in a way joking, but also he seemed like really desperate also on the inside, because he was like, "Oh, look at all these people, look at everything, look at all around, we're totally lost." So he was like, had like a moment of clarity, like he was drunk and they were all, it was summertime and they were on vacation, but he was like, wow, like we're all lost and you've come here to save us. Because he probably realized, to a certain extent within his drunkenness, that all that mirth and laughter and joy and play, actually, it was totally like a waste of time, it was wasting life. And so a lot of people think, you're a party pooper, you're no fun if you practice, Dhamma, and you don't go to parties and you are more quiet and mindful. But actually, that's not true. You have more fun when you're practicing Dhamma. And then giving up prayer. This is japa. So this is like praying to get things that we don't have. So sometimes people say like, oh, they pray to, pray to the devas or the bodhisattvas that they can get a job promotion or something. And, that's not really what we want to be doing. We practice Dhamma to let go, not to get, like, oh, like I remember when I was a kid, sometimes I would lose something and then I would pray to God, like, God, if I can find this, I will pray. I'll be so faithful and I'll be so religious. If you just help me find this, and I'll believe, that you exist and so on. And then, if I found it, I would be, so it's like, that's not, spiritual practice. That's just bargaining to get what we want. So we don't want to do that, really. That's not what the Dhamma is for. We're not trying to like bargain with the Buddha or with the Dhamma. So we want to give that up. We just practice to let go. Giving up parideva, giving up weeping or sorrowing, and giving up ill will or hatred. So, sometimes we feel sorry for ourselves. Like, oh, all these other people, they get these nice things, or look at all these other practitioners, look at all the nice conditions they have, and look at me stuck here doing this. And, we don't want to feel sorry for ourselves. Or we have a hard time and we start weeping, and, oh, this is horrible. We need to give that up. Like, it's time to practice Dhamma, not feel sorry for ourselves. We're just creating more suffering. And giving up ill will or hatred, right? Should be pretty clear. I think we talk about that quite a lot. But obviously also in the context of respecting the Dhamma, if we have hatred or ill will, we will not be receptive. Because hatred is, again, it's a form of conceit. It's a form of pride or arrogance, as all of these things are. Like all of these defilements are forms of arrogance, because when we're hateful, it really means like, I'm better than you and you should be more like me. That's kind of what hatred is like. Like, you didn't do this and you should have done this other thing, which I know about. I know better than you. It's kind of like we hold the world to our standards and then we get upset when they don't hold to our standards. But that's very arrogant. Why would the world be the way that we want it to be? So also with prayer, like I said, it's very arrogant, like, praying to God in order to get what you want or whatever. That's very selfish. Also, partying and so on, it's just about yourself having a fun time. That's not about learning. And also getting, sorrowing and weeping and lamenting, just getting sad because we don't get what we want. So we seem like adults, but actually on the inside, we're like toddlers. So we cry when we don't get what we want. We just learn to do it in more sophisticated ways, supposedly more sophisticated at least. So we want to give these things up. And then deception. So this is Maya. So being fraudulent, living in a world of lies. We want to look for the truth. Fraud, same concept. Greed and conceit. Again, giving up these qualities. So giving up aggression, giving up crudeness, giving up stains and indulgence. So I think all of that has been kind of covered in what I'm saying. I want to focus a little bit on crudeness. So crudeness here is related to this quality, as all these are, but especially crudeness of respect. So especially when we're around people a long time, like if it's a family or if it's a monastery or whatever, it can be very easy to become crude. So to lack respect. Respect in the sense of like when we have an encounter, we have that heart of like, respecting our spiritual companions. And that includes your dog and your kids and your family, because those are also your spiritual companions if you're living with them and you're practicing together. So our spiritual companions, the people who we're practicing with, we want to always have that heart of respect, of not being too self-assuming or too crude, but have that kind of a grace to us, like a gentleness to us. So we try to cultivate this quality of grace or gentleness, so that then our heart becomes more soft. It's like, it helps us, and then it helps the community gel together. So like if someone does something like in a lay life situation, if someone in your family, they don't do the dishes, then you want to maintain not being very crude or crass about it, but having that gentleness when it comes to admonishment and also receiving admonishment and so on. They'd wander free of vanity, steadfast. So very firmly established in these qualities. So this is, comes down to taking refuge in the Dhamma. When we take refuge in the Dhamma, our heart is really set on that, and we really delight in it and enjoy it, and we have a lot of respect for it, and we really cherish it. We cherish the opportunity to hear it. We cherish the teachers who teach it. We cherish our companions who we practice it with. So it really all comes to that, like Dhammang saranang gacchami. We take refuge in the Dhamma. Take refuge in the Dhamma. Sometimes it can be helpful, like whenever you're having a defilement, then you just remember like Dhammang saranang gacchami. Not kilesang saranang gacchami, right? Not I take refuge in my defilements, but Dhammang saranang gacchami. So we just remind ourselves sometimes, like even silently in your mind, you can say that, Dhammang saranang gacchami. Or if you're feeling sorry for yourself, or if you're feeling, greedy and you want to act on your greed, or you're feeling angry, you want to act on your anger, or you're feeling selfish or prideful, like maybe you know better than the person who you're interacting with, Dhammang saranang gacchami. We take refuge in the Dhamma. So even if we know better, even if we're right and we're angry about it, even if we have all the reasons in the world to enjoy the greedy things we want to, we still should be humble and lower ourselves and practice that refuge in the Dhamma, that delight and joy, like, oh yes, awesome, I get to practice the Dhamma. So these difficulties can be really fun when you have that attitude. Like when you encounter a difficulty, if you're a Dhamma practitioner and you delight in the Dhamma, it'll actually be really fun, because you'll be like, yes, nice, I get an opportunity to practice renunciation, or opportunity to practice, this quality. So we just remind ourselves of that, and it can be really, really helpful in those difficult times to kind of change our mindset. Okay, and then it says, understanding is the essence of well-spoken words. Meaning that what is the heartwood, what is the core, what is the point of speaking, of the Dhamma? When we hear the Dhamma, if it's well spoken, what's the point of that? The point of it is to understand it. Stillness, and this is the word here is samadhi. So samadhi is the essence of learning and understanding. So that means that, so why do we hear the Dhamma? Why do we listen to words? We do that so that we can understand them. We understand the meaning, right? That's what we listen with our heart, to understand the meaning, to really get that, to try to feel that essence. And then it says samadhi is the essence of learning and understanding. That means, what's the point of understanding? Is it to put a medal or a plaque and have like a diploma? No, it's to develop stillness, samadhi, to develop a mind which is unified, joyful, and content to be exactly where it is, to be with itself, that it doesn't need to move. That's what we want to develop with our understanding. So if you understand qualities like qualities of respect and humility, qualities of gentleness, qualities of quiet, and qualities of delighting in the Dhamma and joy, those things, that should lead you to samadhi. That's the point of those qualities. Wisdom and learning do not flourish in a hasty and negligent person. Right? So wisdom and learning, they don't grow if we're very hasty. As we say in English, haste makes waste. It's very true, actually. When we rush through our practice, or we rush through things, then we develop a mind which is negligent and a mind which is disrespectful. It's like we put our desires first. So actually going slowly can be really great. If you have a Buddha statue in your room or somewhere, then when you enter the room, I really recommend bowing to the statue. And when you leave the room, I really recommend bowing. Even if you are in a rush, you can just do like a half bow, like a standing bow. But even a full 3 bows, like just 3 bows when you enter and when you leave, just like we do when we enter the Dhamma hall, we sit down, we bow. When we leave, we bow. When we enter the shrine room, we bow. When we leave, we bow. When a senior monastic enters, we bow. When a senior monastic leaves, we bow. So if you have a statue in your room and you're entering that space, it can be really helpful to bow, so that you learn to slow down. And then you just remember the Dhamma qualities, and you become more heedful, mindful. Okay, why am I rushing? And then that wisdom and learning can flourish. And it says, those happy with the teaching proclaimed by the Noble One, the Dhamma by the Buddha, are supreme in speech, mind, and deed. So we want to be doing the best we can with our body, speech, and mind when we're happy with the Dhamma. So when we're very happy with the Dhamma, like I said, we put these qualities first. Like when we're happy with the Dhamma, when we face a difficult scenario, difficult person, difficult emotion, we're like, yes, and we try to, practice the best with our body, speech, and mind. Settled in peace, sweetness, and samadhi, they realize the essence of learning and wisdom. So those people who have realized the essence of these teachings, right? They respect the teacher, they cherish the Dhamma, they hear it, they understand it. The people who really get the essence of that, they're settled in peace, sweetness, being very sweet, being very, like we mentioned before, gentle, and samadhi, have a stable mind. And so this is the basis of the practice, developing this respect for the Dhamma, and then using that to understand the Dhamma and practice gentleness and samadhi and understand. So this time we can respect this sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll take any questions before we close for the morning. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And you see, right, even in that habit we have, that's cultivating that attitude. Okay, I see one comment online from Madeline. It says, often in a Dharma talk, an aspect you might have earlier missed is brought into focus. Suddenly you get clarity. Sadhu, yeah, great, Madeline. It's a really good point. Yeah, sometimes when we hear the same thing, then we get new angles on it, right? So that's very true. Okay, and I see no more questions from online. So at this time, we can go ahead and close. And so I hope that you have a good morning and a good practice, or a good day, whatever time it is for you. And we will see you tonight for monk chat, most likely with our beloved Bhante Sumita, our senior monastic. So another elder you can have respect for. So we'll see you tonight for monk chat if you're there. So have a good day.